Our old friend Roland Barthes is back with a quote to start us off. He said, "No sooner is a form seen than it must resemble something." Noticing resemblances is what enables us to make sense of the world. If something is unfamiliar to us, we try to make it familiar by deciding what it is similar to among the things that we do know about. And it might occur to you that this relates to what Ferdinand de Saussure said about language, and by extension our understanding of reality being relational. Let me use a funny anecdote to illustrate. I once experienced a very young child who lived in a city look at a sheep and say, "Woof." That's pretty funny, right? But it's also a nice illustration of what I'm getting at about resemblance and making sense of things. The child did not know what a sheep was. She had never seen a sheep. So she did quite an intelligent thing. She thought to herself, "I know that is an animal. It is furry and has 4 legs. Maybe it's a dog." She was categorising this new animal in a way that made sense to her. As we grow up and have more and more experiences in more and more contexts, our categorising skills develop considerably, of course. After a time, we have knowledge of a great many physical things, but we still act like that wee child when we want to make sense of something abstract, or make a creative or funny point to others. We liken it to something well known to conjure an image. So, at their basis, rhetorical tropes use one object or word to stand for something else. The rhetorical trope we are probably all most familiar with is metaphor. A metaphor is a figure of speech that describes an object or action in a way that isn't literally true, but helps explain an idea or make a comparison. It makes the unfamiliar more familiar by saying something is something else, or at least that it resembles something else. Metaphor often describes the abstract in terms of the concrete, thus making it easier to grasp. Did you see what I did there? Our brains do not have little mini hands that reach out and catch thoughts, so grasp is being used metaphorically rather than literally here. A great way to recognise metaphor is to see what happens when metaphorical statements are taken literally. Check out this clip exploring that.
Newgrounds.com. Phil, look. I've had it up to here with you.
Relative to what?
What?
Up to here relative to what? The floor? Sea level? The distance from here to the sun?
Look, I feel like we've gotten off on the wrong foot here.
Now, which foot is the right foot?
Which
one's the wrong foot? Is it the left foot or the right foot? Which foot? Your foot? My foot?
Look, I'm sorry, okay? Jeez. This is getting out of hand.
Whose hand? My hand?
Look, man, simmer down.
Are you implying that I am above 98.5 degrees because that's the normal body temperature? And I don't think that's really considered a simmering level. I would consider simmering to be about, 150 degrees, something that, simmers a little bit.
All right.
As an aside, it's important to celebrate such humour rather than using it to make others feel bad. We are all different in how we perceive the world and communicate things, and there's a continuum to how much people use and understand and enjoy metaphor, with some neurodiverse people on the more literal side, which has its benefits in other ways. Before we go any further, I'd like to get you pondering metaphor by thinking about your own examples. As always, why not pause the video here and make some notes as you do the task. If you don't have a terribly metaphorical mind, no worries, just skip on past the tasks. Like some of our other semiotic concepts, we can think of metaphor as taking an additional step. I think, though, that it's more useful to think of it as moving across stepping stones or across a bridge. You're not going up as such in terms of meaning making. One signified acts as a signifier and relates to another signified like it, rather than relating to something beyond it in the way connotations and myth do. That having been said, using a metaphor provides you with an additional set of connotations. Consider the sentence, "Reading the brand is a nightmare." The person hearing this sentence will associate reading the brand with positive or negative feelings as it is, and possibly with something more precise than that. Then, when they hear "is a nightmare," that adds in a whole set of additional connotations and is of course then more likely to make them see it negatively. This addition of more connotations is extremely useful in advertising if you think about it. You have limited time and/or space to get your message across in an advert, so using something that already has a ready-made set of connotations for you to conjure up by using just one word, that's a really efficient and economical use of language. Before we even get as far as advertising though, many brand names are metaphors. Let's have a look at some. As you're pondering them, think about all the extra meaning, including connotations and perhaps even mythical elements that the brand's association with the other things brings. As long as you make an appropriate choice, you're partway to building a brand image and personality with just the name. And remember, we've been recognising that brands are not limited to products. Here are just a few of the Belfast pubs that have metaphorical names. What associations do these give rise to? And speaking of pubs, here's my favourite beer brand, Kinniger, from Letterkenny and Donegal as it happens. They use some really creative metaphorical language in their individual product names. Even where a brand name is not metaphorical, its taglines often are. Here are a few of those. Right, time for another task. See if you can think of a metaphorical brand name or tagline, and then get creative and see if you can come up with one of your own. For some adverts, the point is to shift from the metaphorical meaning back to the concrete or literal meaning to make the point. Here's a very old one for you.
When you're making pastry, trust Cooking to rub in straight from the fridge to help you make perfect pastry every time. Cooking, for the sort of pastry that never fails to give the family a lift.
Give 'em a lift with Cooking.
Verbal metaphors that arise from the words used, the type we've been looking at so far, are the type that we're all most familiar with from studying poetry at school. Metaphors can be visual too, though, and visual metaphors are equally as important as verbal ones in branding and advertising. Let's look at a couple of examples where the important thing for the metaphor is the interplay between the words and the image. Bart calls this relay. It's not just the interplay between the words and image, but the fact that one is used metaphorically and the other is used literally that plays out to great effect. Check out this ad for a hair product. It uses a really clever relay between word and image, which causes a dynamic shift in connotations. Remember that syntagmatically we read from left to right and treat the left as given and the right as new. So here we see the words messed up, which maybe surprise us because we don't expect to see anything with negative connotations in an advert. Because it's a common metaphorical phrase, its metaphorical meaning is the first meaning that comes to mind for most of us. But then we look across to the image and see that being literally messed up is exactly what you want to achieve hairstyle-wise with this product, and this product can enable you to do that. Very clever, isn't it? This ad for Kellogg's Special K works in a similar way. No one wants to be a loser, right? Again, the word is used more often metaphorically than it is literally, so that's the meaning that we take from it when we first read it. But the typography of the word encourages us to move across to the right-hand side of the ad and consider that being a loser literally, to lose weight, is a positive thing that we want to achieve, and we can do that with Special K. There's another discussion we could have here about how responsible it is to attach positive connotations to weight loss and to make the product more about that than about good general health, but that's a discussion for another day or something for you to ponder later. Now we're going to look at some metaphors that are purely visual, and we're going to link these back to Peirce's sign types. Remember those? icons, where the relationship between the sign and what it represents is one of similarity, indexes, where the relationship between the sign and what it represents is one of pointing towards, and symbols, where the relationship between the sign and what it represents is a convention. For iconic metaphors, the similarity of the image can work at quite a basic level. Consider this ad for Laurent Perrier champagne. And what about this Samsung ad? Yes, I know it's ancient, but I think it's quite fun to still use it. Arguably, there is very little similarity between the phone and a little black dress, though to be fair, they are both small and they are both black. The relationship of similarity is built up here as much from the addition of a tag as from any similarity with the product itself. This one reminds us how metaphor, amongst other semiotic concepts, can be used to target a brand or product in a gendered way, notwithstanding the fact that there's nothing stopping any one of you wearing a little black dress. And remember our Maltesers ad? The iconic metaphor here is even more to do with the supporting image of the halo as it is to do with the Malteser itself, which really is nothing like a person or an angel. Visual metaphors can also be symbolic, like this really clever one that presents insurance cover as a condom. It would certainly be noticed, wouldn't it? Now let's come back to Maltesers. They use visual metaphors in a really clever and comedic way to, if you like, embed the product in everyday life by making it part of the physicality or the actions of the people in the ad. You'll recognise the second one from our discussion about turning binary oppositions on their head to make the minority dominant.
Come on, we've heard the rumours.
All right. There I was, mid-work presentation, Tim and the rest of the team sitting opposite me.
I know.
Suddenly, I'm boiling. Another flush. So I whipped off my jumper, flapping madly to cool down. I'd only taken off all the layers, hadn't I?
All of them.
All of them. Full beam.
No. Oh, stop kidding yourself, dear.
You.
So, new boyfriend.
Right.
And we are back at his, getting a little frisky. Don't frisky. My hands may have been wandering slightly. Go on. And then I start having a spasm.
No.
Which he misinterprets. So awkward. He was a good lady. You're so bad. That's what he said.
Let's do another task to help you apply the notion of visual metaphor. Say hi to Giambattista Vico. I've gone even further back in history than usual to get my theory this time. Vico was around in the 18th century. But what some of these traditional thinkers had to say was crucial to our understandings of things today, and it's important too to acknowledge when someone was the first person to observe something or coin a phrase, even if many others have since built on what they did. In 1744, Giambattista Vico observed that many metaphors came from the human body and senses and passions, probably the most tangible thing to us if you think about it. He had a point, didn't he? Consider phrases like these. Can you think of others from everyday life, branding, or advertising? Lakoff and Johnson are back. We met them briefly, you'll remember, when we were talking about syntagmatic choices. Metaphor is actually the thing they're best known for. Lakoff and Johnson say that there are 3 types of metaphor. The type we've been considering so far in this video, and indeed the type we come across most in life, is ontological metaphors. They associate activities, emotions, and ideas with entities and substances. A key subtype of ontological metaphor is personification. I'm sure you've come across personification before, again probably when studying poetry or literature more broadly at school. But I wonder whether you realised it was a form of metaphor. We find personification in brand names. And we find it used to make brands memorable and to develop a brand's story. I'm referring to where the brand itself is not personified, but a recognisable character is introduced who we get to know and look forward to seeing again and again. Probably the most successful use of this type of personification in recent years is Alexander Orlov as the face of Compare the Market. Indeed, as time has gone on, we've met more and more of Alexander's friends and family to develop the brand story further. Let's remind ourselves of the very first ad to feature Alexander. He was really striking right from the beginning.
I am Alexander, founder of CompareTheMeerkat.com, where we compare meerkats. Size, hobbies, you know. But lately we get many people looking for car insurance. People looking for CompareTheMarket.com. I cannot find you cheap car insurance. For Compare Meerkats, come to CompareTheMeerkat.com. For easy way to save on car insurance, please go to CompareTheMarket.com. Simples.
We sometimes find personification in advertising copy. Consider this ad for Muesli. The text is very small and the quality is not great, but the copy in the centre of the ad, all the more noticeable by being placed at the centre rather than the margin, says, "Our morning shift." This doesn't personify the brand or even introduce a brand character. What it does do is make us identify with the bees by casting them in a human context of going to work. Visual metaphor can use personification too. Consider this ad for Absolute Vodka, which uses an iconic metaphor to cast the bottle as a person. Here too, the likeness can be really quite basic, like we saw with the little black dress phone ad. When we met Lakoff and Johnson in one of the Syntagmatic Choices videos, it was in relation to their work on orientational metaphors, metaphors that are to do with where something is or is perceived to be in space or in relation to another thing. And remember, there is often an evaluative aspect to this, which is why it's so useful for persuasive genres like advertising. Consider these phrases. It might have occurred to you that these do not only relate to syntagmatic choices, they relate to paradigmatic choices too. This relates to our discussions about binary oppositions and related connotations. Using an evaluative orientational metaphor sets a positive evaluation against the negative evaluation using its opposite would cause. Here are just a couple of uses of orientational metaphor in advertising. Keep your eyes and ears open and see if you can pick up on others in your everyday life. Lakoff and Johnson's third type of metaphor is conceptual metaphor. These are overarching metaphors that allow us to structure one concept in terms of another. Consider these phrases. These construct time as a valuable commodity. Indeed, time is money is itself a high-level conceptual metaphor. So far we've seen what an effective and efficient meaning maker metaphor is for branders and advertisers. It might surprise us to know then that sometimes it is proactively not used. You might remember me saying way back in our Introduction to Semiotic Concepts video that the Action Cancer ad we looked at did not use any metaphor. This makes a lot of sense. The topic is a serious, evidence-based one. There is no need for creative or persuasive language to be used. Indeed, we can imagine that doing so might jar with the topic and downplay its seriousness. Likewise, there is practically no metaphorical content in the entire script of the full 2-minute Nike Dream Crazy advert. It's a really emotive advert, so observing the lack of metaphor might surprise us at first. But it's an advert about achieving things, not simply dreaming about them. So keeping it firmly rooted in physicality and concreteness makes a lot of sense and works very well. Again, keep your eyes and ears open for any noticeable absence of metaphor in the ads you consume, and reflect on why that might be the case.